Hey there, it's Duchos, and welcome to another historical ride. Today, we're diving into something that really happened, and it might just surprise you more than a pop quiz on a Saturday morning. So sit back, grab something good, and let's see what history has in store for us this time. This is Duchos history without the boring stuff. 1066. The year. England changed forever. The year is 1066. One dead king, 3 contenders, and a battle that changed England forever. This is a story of betrayal, oaths, Viking raiders, and Norman knights. The Battle of Hastings wasn't just a fight for the crown, it was a shock that shook a kingdom for centuries. Get ready for one of the most important years in European history. The king is dead and the crown is up for grabs. It's the year 1066, and England is standing at a crossroads. King Edward the Confessor, the last ruler from the House of Wessex, has just died, and with him, the kingdom's stability is gone too. He left no heir, which in a monarchy is about as smart as parking your car on train tracks with the doors open and hoping no train comes by. Edward may have been a holy man, but as a king, he was more of a passive observer. He spent most of his reign praying and building Westminster Abbey, which, to be fair, turned out great. But politics, not really his thing. Over the years, he promised the English crown to multiple people. Imagine promising to save a seat in the pub for someone and then doing the same for 2 others. What happens when all 3 show up? According to some accounts, just before his death, Edward declared that Harold Godwinson should succeed him. Harold was the most powerful man in the realm and head of one of England's top noble families. He had massive support across the country and was practically acting like a king even before Edward died. There was no parliament yet, but the Council of Nobles, the Witenagemot, confirmed the choice. So on January 6, 1066, Harold was crowned king. But here's the catch. William, Duke of Normandy, in what is now northern France, claimed Edward had promised him the crown years earlier and that Harold had even sworn to support him. Problem was, that promise happened after Harold was shipwrecked near Normandy, captured by William, and forced to swear on holy relics. So was it a valid oath or just forced PR? Either way, William was furious and ready to claim his rightful throne with a sword. As if that weren't messy enough, Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, also claimed the crown. He said he had a right to it based on an old agreement between his father and the former king Knut the Great. Harald was a seasoned warrior. He had fought in Byzantium, battled across northern Europe, and he was a proper Viking. If he couldn't win the throne, he'd probably carry it off like a trophy. So here we are. 1 dead king, 3 rivals, each with an army and a dream of ruling England. It's like a medieval battle royale. No parachutes, just swords, axes and longbows. And Harold, he's sitting on the throne thinking he might finally catch his breath. What he doesn't know is that 2 invading armies are already on their way, one from the north, one across the channel. And that his name is about to go down in history as the king with one of the shortest and wildest reigns England has ever seen. 3 kings and 1 crown. The year 1066 was like a badly dealt poker game for England. 3 players with royal ambition and only 1 crown on the table. And each of them was ready to go all in, even if it meant flipping the whole table with a sword. Harold Godwinson was already sitting on the throne, but his position was far from secure. It was more like sitting on a powder keg while someone offers you a box of matches. Harold was a capable commander backed by the Witenagemot and much of the English nobility. But he had 2 very serious problems, and both of them had just begun landing troops. The first threat came from the north. Harald Hardrada, King of Norway, decided it was the perfect time to claim his so-called inherited right. Sure, his claim came from old agreements made decades ago, but when you're a Viking, details aren't your top priority. Harald was a warrior through and through. In his youth, he fought in the legendary Varangian Guard in Byzantium and survived enough battles to fill an entire Norse saga. In 1066, he joined forces with Tostig, Harold's own brother, who had been exiled from England and was now burning for revenge. A Viking warlord and a bitter outcast made for exactly the kind of visit Harold really didn't need. Meanwhile, Down in northern France, William, Duke of Normandy, was preparing his own invasion. And he wasn't joking around. He was a man who never took no for an answer. Since childhood, when he was mocked for being born out of wedlock and called William the Bastard, he had fought for everything he had. Now, he held what he believed was a trump card. He claimed Edward had promised him the crown. He also insisted Harold had sworn an oath to support him and then broke it. For William, this was personal. He sent envoys to Rome, secured the Pope's blessing and a holy banner, and gathered a massive invasion force. Ships, knights, archers, supplies, everything was ready, all for a crown he believed was rightfully his. So England faced a double invasion. From the north came Hardrada with hardened Norse veterans. From the south, William waited only for favorable winds to cross the channel. Harold was stuck in the middle, like a twig in a wedding cake. He might hold one side, but not both at once. And meanwhile, ordinary English folk still had to till the fields, pay their taxes, and wait to see who would end up ruling them. For them, it wasn't a war, it was a waiting game. Who would win? The homegrown Harold, the brutal Viking, or the ambitious Norman? History was about to give them an answer, one they probably wouldn't like. 3-yarded chapter, a lightning strike from the north. While William of Normandy was impatiently waiting for favorable winds to cross the channel, the north already had them. And they were strong. In mid-September 1066, Harold Hardrada set out with a fleet of around 300 ships and 10 to 15,000 men, heading straight for the English coast. He landed without much resistance. Harold Godwinson was still down south, waiting for William to finally set sail. It was a bit of a stalemate, but Harold wasn't one to wait. He attacked. Northern England was almost undefended at that point. Harold and Tostig quickly drove out the local forces from York, and on September 20th they defeated the English army at the Battle of Fulford. It's a battle that often gets overlooked, but it was a major blow. The English, led by Earls Morcar and Edwin, were crushed. Harold had victory in his hands and expected the north to surrender as easily as steamed bread under an axe. And then came the twist. Instead of sitting and waiting for William, Harold Godwinson did something completely insane. In just 4 days, he marched his army nearly 300 kilometers from Sussex all the way to the north. That's like running an ultramarathon in full armor with a sword, and when you get there, your reward is a brutal battle. He moved fast, across hills, forests and mud. No wonder the Norwegians were relaxed. No one expected Harold to show up so quickly. He literally caught them off guard while they were taking off their armor and sunbathing by the river. On September 25th, 1066, the Battle of Stamford Bridge began. The Norwegians were scattered, their armor stashed away on ships or left near York. Some of them were even off collecting hostages, thinking the locals would surrender peacefully. Mistake. Harold struck like lightning. The battle was fierce, long and bloody. Legend has it that one lone Norwegian warrior held the bridge against the entire English army and killed over 40 men. He was only brought down when someone floated under the bridge in a barrel and stabbed him from below with a spear hook. Whether it's true or not, it makes one hell of a story. The result was total defeat for the Norwegians. Harold Hardrada was hit in the neck with an arrow. Tostig died too. Out of the original fleet of 300 ships, only about 24 were needed to carry the survivors back. Harold could finally breathe again, but only for a moment, because just a few days later the southern wind finally began to blow, and William of Normandy was ready to land. For the Frenchman. Across the channel, while Harold was still wiping the last bits of Viking grit off his sword after smashing the Norwegians, across the channel sat William, Duke of Normandy, nervously watching the skies. His army, ships and supplies had been ready for weeks, but the English Channel was in a bad mood. The winds were wrong. Rain, storms, so the invasion had to wait. William would have loved to scream now or never at the weather, but the weather didn't care. But William wasn't the kind of man to sit around doing nothing. Over the years, he had built a brutally effective army in Normandy. Heavy Norman cavalry, light infantry, expert archers. He had forged alliances with nobles from Brittany, Flanders, and northern France by promising them land in England if they joined his cause. He even secured the Pope's blessing, making his invasion not just political but also holy. In quotes, of course, because it was still a war, but medieval PR was something the church knew how to handle. When the weather finally cleared on September 27, 1066, William wasted no time. The next day, he landed at Pevensey in Sussex. He arrived with a fleet of hundreds of ships, bringing around 7,000 to 8,000 men. And he got to work immediately. He fortified Pevensey and marched to Hastings, where he set up a base. He wasn't going to wait for the English to find him. He wanted to be ready. Meanwhile, Harold Godwinson, battered and exhausted from Stamford Bridge, heard the news. The Normans had landed. Great, no rest. A full turnaround straight back south, but this time his army wasn't in top shape. Many men had died in the north, others were left behind. Still, after a few days of marching, Harold reached Senlac Hill, near Hastings. There he set up his defensive position and waited. And William? Suddenly he had a bit of a problem. He had hoped Harold would take longer to arrive, maybe even lose his grip on power along the way. But Harold was as stubborn as a mule in chainmail. Both men knew a decisive battle was coming. England was standing on the edge of something big. And while villagers placed their bets on who would win, William was drawing up his battle plan. He couldn't be sure, but he had a feeling that if he won this fight, history would stop calling him William the Bastard and start calling him William the Conqueror. 5. The clash at Hastings, the morning of October 14th, 1066, dawned over the misty hills of Sussex. On one hill stood Harold Godwinson and his Anglo-Saxon army. On the other, William of Normandy with his knights and archers. And in between them, history ready to rewrite the future of England. Harold had taken a strong defensive position atop Senlac Hill, surrounded by his loyal housecarls, his elite bodyguard, and a massive force of fyrds, armed farmers and volunteers. Their tactic was the famous shield wall. It was the traditional Anglo-Saxon method of fighting. Men standing side by side, shield against shield, spears pointed forward. And one simple plan: hold the line. It was a wall of flesh, wood, and steel. And if it didn't break early, the enemy had a serious problem. William set up on the opposite side. His army was divided into 3 parts: Bretons on the left, Normans in the center, and French troops on the right. They attacked in waves, infantry first, then archers, and finally heavy cavalry. But the English wall held firm. The shields didn't budge, and Norman soldiers fell one after another. Then came an interesting turn. The Breton flank broke and started running. Maybe they panicked for real, or maybe it was part of William's plan. Either way, the English, hyped up by their success, chased the fleeing enemy down the hill. And that was exactly what Harold had feared. The shield wall broke, and the rest of William's cavalry turned around and charged straight at the scattered pursuers. It was a slaughter. William noticed the effect and started using fake retreats on purpose. He ordered repeated feigned withdrawals to lure the Saxons out of position, and it worked. Each time the shield wall broke, Norman knights drove in and turned the fighting into brutal hand-to-hand combat. The battle lasted all day. Hundreds of men died on both sides. As the sun began to set, a moment came that historians still debate, but which has become legendary. Harold Godwinson was struck by an arrow in the eye. Whether it was truly an arrow or something else, one thing is certain: he fell. And without their leader, the rest of the English army began to collapse. Some tried to flee, others kept fighting in vain. William had won, and it wasn't just one battle, it was the fate of an entire nation. That evening, it's said William ordered Harold's body to be found. According to some accounts, it was so badly mangled they could only identify him by the bracelets he wore. Such was the end of the last Anglo-Saxon king of England. 6. The death of Harold and the fall of the Anglo-Saxons. After the Battle of Hastings, darkness fell over England, both literally and figuratively. Harold was dead, his brother Gyrth as well. Along with them lay hundreds, maybe thousands of fallen men. The battle had been so brutal that the field was said to reek of death for months. And the victor? William of Normandy. Tired but alive, one step closer to the crown. But winning a battle doesn't mean the crown is yours. The English weren't ready to give up. After Harold's death, the Wight and Agmot met again to decide who should be king. They chose a name, Edgar Atheling, grandson of the former English king Edmund Ironside. But there was one major issue. He was only around 14 years old, and though he had royal blood, he had no sword to back it up. Meanwhile, William wasn't wasting time. He moved slowly but systematically toward London. He didn't rush in blindly. He waited, crushed any resistance he met, and more importantly, he built castles. A tactic he would use all over the country. Arrive, break the old power, and raise a fortress in its place. A medieval way of saying, "This is mine now, thanks." London held out for a while, but then the defenses started to crumble. Some nobles switched sides. Others realized the Normans weren't just a storm from across the channel. They were the new masters. So on December 25th, 1066, yes, Christmas Day, William was crowned King of England at Westminster Abbey, the very abbey that Edward the Confessor had built. Symbolic, very. There was, however, a bit of an awkward moment. When the crowd inside began to cheer, "God save the King," the soldiers outside thought a rebellion had started. So they panicked and set a few houses on fire. Welcome to a new era, with a fireworks show to kick it off. And what about the Anglo-Saxons? Some fled, others surrendered. But most of the population had to accept the truth. From now on, they would be ruled by someone else, speaking a different language and enforcing different laws. The England they had known was over. Norman England had begun. 7. What came after the Battle of Hastings wasn't just a clash between two armies. It was a revolution by sword. And when the dust finally settled, one thing was clear. England would never be Anglo-Saxon again. The Normans came, they saw, and most importantly, they stayed. William, now rightfully called the Conqueror, set up an entirely new regime. He replaced nearly all the Anglo-Saxon nobles with his own men, rewarding them with land for their loyalty. Within a few years, the entire ruling class was basically speaking French, and that wasn't all. Laws, taxes, courts, castles, everything changed. William brought with him a Norman vision of governance and started building a tightly controlled central state. England became part of a broader European world, no longer just an isolated island with its own ways. In 1086, he had the Domesday Book compiled, a massive record of every piece of property in the country. Like a medieval Excel spreadsheet, but done by hand with ink and parchment. And now, about the language. English got hit by a catapult. Many words we use today, like beef, castle, judge, city, come straight from French. When a farmer went to market, he sold a cow, but a nobleman ate beef. That's how a whole linguistic hierarchy was born. It took centuries for modern English to emerge, a blend of Saxon roots and Norman overlay. Hastings also became the last successful invasion of England from the mainland. Ever since, the island has fought tooth and nail to keep invaders out, and that one single battle is so deeply etched into British culture that it's both national trauma and national origin story. It's on tapestries, in textbooks, in video games, and now on YouTube. One last bit of trivia. William, the great conqueror, spent the rest of his life fearing rebellions and assassination plots. He knew he had taken the throne by force. His reign was effective but harsh, and when he died years later, his body famously burst during the funeral because the coffin was too small. In the end, even the conqueror deflated like an old legend, but his impact, that still lives on. And so ended the year 1066, one of the most important years in European history. A year when the old world fell and a new one began. A year when England lost a king but found a new direction, whether it liked it or not. Thanks for watching all the way through. If you liked the video, drop a like, hit that subscribe button, and feel free to share it. It really helps others who care about history too. Let me know in the comments what you'd like to see next and if you enjoyed this one. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next video.